Well, let's just get started. My name is Michael Lancaster. I am the Southeast Regional Director for the Douglas Leadership Institute, as well as the State President for the Frederick Douglass Foundation. This is a joint uh, event tonight with both organizations as we discuss issues that are relevant to parents. Uh, in our current climate right now, there are a lot of things going on. Just to give a little bit of background, the Douglas Leadership Institute is a 501c3 organization that is dedicated to equipping faith-based and community leaders to apply principles, biblical principles, in the marketplace. We believe that these principles, righteousness, liberty, justice, and virtue, are important to be reflected in our society, and we equip leaders to actually do that. And then with the Frederick Douglass Foundation, we support policies and people who embrace certain values, traditional biblical values, and we like to see that reflected within public office uh, and in the public space. So we do things on that side, which is a 501c4 organization. So we're happy to have this parents forum right now tonight. We're happy to have a state representative with us, a pastor and a juvenile justice expert, as well as an educational expert this evening. I'm going to open us in prayer, and then I'm going to get started with our forum. Father, we thank you so much for who you are. We thank you that your light shines upon us, Lord God, and we're hoping that your glory, Lord, will uplift our society, Lord God, here in Atlanta, here in Georgia, and even our nation. We pray, Father, that the things that we discuss tonight, Lord God, the issues, Lord God, that we bring light to, will bring forth a solution, Lord God, a glorious heaven sent solution where we can see a change, Lord, in our children and in our people, that we might have a society, Lord God, that reflects your glory and honors you, that we can live in peace amongst all men. So I thank you for these people who have sacrificed their time this evening. I thank you for their awareness and for their enlightenment and for their action, Lord God, after this call is done, as we move forward to make a change and a difference for everyone. So we ask this in the name of your Son. Amen. All right. So I'm going to start off. Thank you again for those who have come on, try to be the moderator as well as the Zoom coordinator all at the same time. But thank you all for joining us this evening. Again, my name is Michael Lancaster. I'll be moderating this evening, and I'm going to introduce our first panelist, which is State Representative Misha Maynor. Representative Maynor is a native Atlantan. She was elected to the Georgia House of Representatives in 2020, and she represents the citizens of House District 56 in the heart of Atlanta, including Midtown, Georgia Tech, the Atlanta University Center Consortium, Atlanta's historic West Side, Atlantic Station, and Piedmont Park. In 2023, she became the first African American woman to serve in the Georgia General Assembly as a Republican, with a historic party switch sending shockwaves throughout the nation. Known as a committed and passionate advocate for helping the underserved and those often neglected, all of Representative Maynor's constituents consider her an expert strategist and problem solver. During her first legislative session, Representative Maynor authored bipartisan legislation to create the Fulton Technology and Energy Authority, the first public agency in the nation to focus on the fourth industrial revolution workforce. Before serving in public office, Representative Maynor founded an immersion language school to teach children how to be citizens of the world, not just of their neighborhoods. Representative Maynor also trademarked the Junior Business League, a program showing children how to think outside the box through entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and civic engagement. Her professional experience includes a master's in physical therapy from Howard University, and she is currently working on her doctorate in business administration from North Central University. Her favorite job is being the proud mother of Alexis and Chloe, students of the Atlanta Public School System. As an APS graduate herself from Mays High School, she is nationally known as a parents' rights loyalist and will stop at nothing to ensure children have resources to succeed. Her walk in life is attributed to following God's plan while being led by the Holy Spirit. I just wanted to note that while the Douglas Leadership Institute does not promote political candidates or parties, we do encourage incumbent office holders through forums such as these to show how they are advancing righteousness, liberty, justice, and virtue through the positions that they hold. And with that, Representative Maynard, I wanted to ask you our first question of the evening. Considering I just introduced you as a person who just switched parties and I just gave your resume as a state legislator, I just wanted to say, political parties aside, you have made education and criminal justice issues key in your agenda and your platform. Why have you chosen these two areas to focus on? And what needs surrounding education and criminal justice do you see in your district in particular?
Well, thanks first for just having me, and welcome to everybody that is taking the time to join us. I think the simple answer would just be that I represent the community that I was born in. So this is a vested interest of mine. The community looks the exact same way it did when I was growing up, if not a little bit worse. I tell people when I used to get off of the bus, I would run home because there were crackheads at the bus stop. That is still the same today, except now there are a lot more issues besides just crackheads. So what does that mean? My mom, fortunately, had the foresight of, you know what, my daughter needs to go to a school outside of the boundaries in which we live. And so I went to Southwest Middle School, which is now Jean Childs Young School. And then from there, I went to Mays High School. And the schools that I represent now in that same area that I grew up in, these are schools that are in the bottom 25% of schools statewide. Some of the schools, only 3% are meeting math proficiency, only 2% are meeting reading proficiency. And with data like that, you know, you have to ask yourself, well, what are the chances of opportunities for these kids? And Goldman Sachs just recently came out with a study that said in 10 years, 300 million jobs are going to be lost to artificial intelligence. Those are the jobs that most likely are going to be from kids that don't graduate from high school, only have a GED, high school dropouts. And so my concern really is if the kids can't perform simple math, if they can't read, if they're not going to have an opportunity to have a job because of artificial intelligence, that leads to despair, that leads to lack of hope. Oftentimes that leads to crime. And I'm glad the bishop is on so he can talk more about that pipeline of just education directly into the prison school system. Studies show that, you know, third grade reading level and eighth grade math are indicators of future potential leading into the criminal justice system.
Okay. And so as you look at your district, or as you look to the legislative session that's coming up in 2023, 2024, how do you see legislatively, what agenda legislatively do you see being advanced? Or do you have a personal vision or personal bills that you would like to sponsor? Or do you see things improving on the legislative landscape?
You know, just because I switch parties, I will have the same agenda that I've always had. So I'm still going to support families. I'm still going to support the underserved. I'm still going to support the people without a traditional voice out there. I'm still going to support public safety. I'm still going to support educational freedom. This past session, we did not pass the school choice bill. So I definitely want to see that pass this year. We will be doing lots of things with redistricting potentially in this upcoming session. So it's also important that there's representation. During the last redistricting process with the Fulton County maps in particular, my district was being sidelined, if you will, because of how the lines were being drawn. And so I took a personal stance and said, hey, I'm not going to let you guys disadvantage my voters because they are the poorest in the community. So just making sure that the poor are heard is always going to be my objective.
Okay. I'm going to move on to Miss Amanda McGee um, to just kind of launch off of what you were just talking about educationally. Um, but first, just to introduce her, Amanda McGee is a licensed realtor. She's with the White Eichert Collective in Buckhead, and she's also a consultant with the American Federation for Children, which is a national school choice organization. I always like their name because you have the American Federation for Teachers, but then you have the American Federation for Children. Kind of tells you what the focus is. Amanda formerly served as regional engagement coordinator for Black engagement for the RNC, um, and she worked at the community center in College Park, Georgia. She's the proud mother of Gabriel, and she loves teaching him at home. And so, with that, Amanda, I'll just ask you, um, simply as we just talked about what's going on with education within Representative Maynard's district, how do you look at education as a whole? A lot of times people look at education as just kind of dropping facts in people in kids' heads, just dropping knowledge in there. But what we know is that it's the forming of a human individual. It is the forming of the whole child. Um, so as you're doing that, I would think that you would want to have someone you trust guiding that process. You chose the homeschool. Is that the reason why you chose the homeschool, or can you talk about homeschooling in general as an answer or as an alternative to in our educational fight or struggle?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it for you allowing me to speak on these issues that are important to all of us and that I personally, I'm experiencing because I am a mother. Um, I basically started homeschooling in 2020 when the COVID shutdowns happened, and I started listening in on kind of what the teachers were teaching the kids. I was shocked. I knew prior to that, just with the public schools and charter schools, that there were a lot of issues, but I didn't realize how bad it was. So I'm a conservative person, we have God in our lives. And so I just want my son to always have those type of values. So that's why I chose, even when schools let back in, to just go ahead and homeschool. And we've been doing the Heritage Foundation, which is a classical conservative curriculum. And it's going really well. He's on a very, very advanced, able to do things that he loves. He wants to study architecture, so we're doing that. I'm even learning things that I didn't know before. He read the Constitution, he's reading the Bible, and those are things that are very important to me. So that's why I decided to homeschool. And homeschool is on the rise in this country. It went from about 2% in 2020. It's up to about 4 to 5% now. So yeah, I'm excited about it and want to continue. I do want him to eventually, maybe in middle, junior high school, to go back to school, but it would have to be something that is along the lines of what he's already learning and involved in.
Glad you brought up classical education. I do want to ask you a question about that a little later. But I wanted to ask you, when we look at kind of the landscape of education right now, Baltimore has made news in the last few days because not one student out of 13 high schools scored proficient in math. And we can go down stories in Baltimore, out of Maryland. I hate to pick on Baltimore. There was also a story last year about a student who had a 0.13 GPA, but he was the top half of his class. So we hear stories and headlines like these coming out. Um, how does the American Federation for Children try to counter those kind of headlines? And do you see that kind of trend heading in Georgia? Well, obviously, you decided to take your son out and homeschool, but just overall, how's AFC trying to address these kind of issues, and what do you see as the difference maker?
Well, area. So we do have SB 233. Representative Misha Maynard mentioned that it didn't pass. It is in reconsideration. So we really want SB 233 passed because, like she said, schools in her district are in the bottom 25%. And those are the exact kids that this bill will help. So here in Georgia, we really want to get that bill passed this session. So everyone just get on board. However, you can support all of our legislators to pass SB 233. We really want that. You may have heard AFC just launched a super PAC nationwide. They're devoting at least $10 million to the elections in 2024 to candidates who are willing to fund school choice, legislate school choice all around the country, including Georgia. And so that's one of the ways that AFC is trying to help and just push candidates, even primary candidates who are against school choice. We want them out of there. We want people to represent our state, our children, in the parents' best interest. And the data shows that school choice is in the best interest of our children and our parents and families all around the country. The statistics are very good and in favor of school choice, and candidates that support school choice, they do better. They're just better candidates, they're better politicians, and the benefits just speak for themselves.
I'll move on to our last panelist this evening. I'm a little partial to this one, but Bishop Garland R. Hunt is the investigator. He's also a proven strategic leader with dynamic ministry background and extensive experience in leadership, management, and pastoral care. After completing a BA from Howard University in 1980, and a JD from Howard University in 1983, Howard University School of Law. He served as a judicial law clerk and staff attorney with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. In 1993, he founded the Raleigh International Church, and in 2000, he moved from Raleigh back to his hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, to serve as executive pastor of the Father's House. His executive leadership spans more than 28 years with the Fellowship of International Churches, Warrington Blue Ministries, and New Generation Campus Ministries. He has served in many state and national leadership roles. In 2004, he was appointed to the Georgia Board of Pardons and Parole by Governor Sonny Perdue and was appointed chairman of the Parole Board in 2006. In 2010, he became commissioner of the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. In 2011, he served as president of Prison Fellowship, founded by Chuck Colson. In March 2015, Bishop Wellington Boone installed Bishop Hunt as senior pastor of the Father's House. Each week, Bishop Hunt demonstrates his pastor's heart with his passionate preaching and vibrant leadership. He is also currently a senior fellow with the Douglas Leadership Institute and its Forward Justice Initiative. He is married to Pastor Eileen Hunt, and they have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. And so with that, Bishop Hunt, let me just ask you, with your pastor, you have a faith background, but you also have a dynamic legal and justice system background. And so we just talked about education with Representative Maynard and Amanda. As you look at the poor educational outcomes, we know that they can be a catalyst to juvenile crime and incarceration. How can parents, or what can you tell parents tonight to prevent their children from getting caught up in this school to prison pipeline, as it's so called?
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael, for giving me a chance to share with everyone. It's very critical. It's very critical. And I decided to put a PowerPoint so we have some visuals as it relates to it. And if you guys could just go through it with me for the next just a few minutes, because this school to prison pipeline is very, very serious. And having the opportunity to be commissioner of juvenile justice, as well as now I'm a board member there, we just see these issues as critical. So anyway, we'll go on through the first couple of slides there. I want the first one just talks about what justice is. You can go through. Just keep going. Yeah, and those are scales of justice. But let's deal with this right here. The whole idea of juvenile justice, that these kids being thrown into a spiraling juvenile system without a real way of true reform and rehabilitation. And so we're always looking for diversionary alternatives. And that can be probation, the church community mentoring projects. So we want to make sure that we have that. And when you start talking about juvenile justice reform, it's very important that we have those kind of alternatives so they won't get directly necessarily in a facility. In that regard, maybe they can have diversionary issues that help. But specifically, Blacks represent 44% of the youth that are detained, and 46 are waived to adult criminal court, and 58% of those are admitted to state prisons. So that just gives you an idea of that revolving door that really relates to the kids as when they come into the system. They usually and many times graduate right into the adult system. You can go to the next slide. This is, and I hope you guys can see this, but the numbers are pretty to the bad. So you talk about school to prison. A lot of times when family members start from the home and they don't have fathers in the home, a lot of times that's really is a strike against them as it is. So I could come back to fatherlessness when we could talk about it. But right now, if you look at just school to prison, you see 40% of students that of students expelled from the
Is it just me or is the fish pot frozen?
Yeah, I think he's frozen.
Okay, I thought it was me.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we're not frozen anymore. Okay.
Okay. He's not back yet. Well, Representative Maynard, I can come to you.
Okay.
I guess I can leave that up there right now. So I just wanted you to talk about, yourself. People see you as a public figure, a politician, a representative. They talk about your party, your this or that, whatever. I just wanted you to share your heart as a mom. I know you have two daughters, Alexis and Chloe. How do you want people to view you as a parent? And can you just express your heart for them as a parent that maybe other parents on this call could identify with or resonate with?
I am a mom. Alexis is 11. She just started middle school, and Chloe is a freshman at college. And Chloe got a scholarship for almost $400,000 to Boston University. I mention that because the fight is not necessarily for my kids, because I had the resources to navigate the system to make sure that they got what they needed. My real concern are the kids that I grew up with that do not have those resources. Over the weekend, I went to a church fair and I saw a guy named Patrick that I grew up with, that I played with. He was actually getting clothes from the community closet for his son Quint. His son Quint goes to the school with the 2% reading proficiency. And so even though my child is not struggling, my heart goes out to those parents that are struggling. I want parents out there to know that someone is advocating for them, someone does care about their kids. I want the parents to know that they have a voice. A lot of times in poor, underserved communities, leadership takes them for granted. Leadership thinks that they can't make sound decisions because of their socioeconomic status. I do not believe that that's true. I think it doesn't matter how much money is in your pocket. You know how to love your child because God has shown you how to love your child. The other thing that I want the parents out there to know is if you're not receiving something in the school system, there are layers of different alternatives. So you may go to your teacher and say something. If you don't get resolved there, there's the assistant principal, then there's the principal, but then there's the local school board. And to be honest with you, when my daughter went to school at FL Stanton, loved the school to death, loved the teachers, all educated, marvelous teachers. But I had a problem that I needed to bring to the school board. The school board person told me to move out of the district, basically, go to a district with more resources, if you will, and did not offer any support. So even if something like that happens, I want the parents to know you have state legislators that have direct access to the Board of Commissioner, the State Board of Education Commissioner. So there are always alternatives. You always have a voice. Don't let anybody ever tell you how you feel is not important. Don't ever let anybody tell you that your child does not deserve more.
That is, first of all, I'm still stuck on 2% literacy. And then I got stuck on, they told you to move. I'm like, um, okay. So, I mean, so when you're facing odds like that, so now I want to go back to your Howard alum, your fellow Howard University alum, Bishop Hunt. So Bishop, you know, you can continue talking about what you're talking about, because when you're told your child is in a school with 2% reading literacy rate, and you're told if you don't like it, you move, even if you can't afford to move, you're just setting children up to again get into the school to prison pipeline. So if you want to continue talking about your school to prison pipeline, I'll put the chart back up. It's good to have you back.
Good. Well, let's just show a couple slides. I'm not going to go through all of it, but just so you can see, just go back to the one that had the statistics on it, and I'll just summarize quickly, and then we can talk specifically about questions. Yeah, keep rolling through those slides.
Now my mouse didn't want to work. Okay, there you go.
Oh, okay, all right. So anyway, but you can just see, and sometimes we have a lot of different terminology that is real when they talk about mass incarceration. I mean, those are real, statistics. You can even see at the bottom down there where it talks about how 1 out of 3 African American males will be incarcerated in their lifetime, and even Latinos in that regard, 1 out of 6 Latinos will be incarcerated in their lifetime. It's very real. And then, of course, even in foster care, it gets even worse. 70% of, like in California, for instance, 70% of the whole prison, the state prisons in California come from foster care. So going back to the family is going to be critical, because that's where the determination is how successful they're going to be in college. If they get to college, how successful they'll be in high school, if they graduate, or even from elementary school. You can almost see from the very beginning that there are certain attitudes and character traits and things that are going on that are not allowing them to succeed. And once they get past a certain point, there are percentages that are real that we have to pay attention to get on the front end of this to try to help build families and strong families. You can go to the next slide. And again, there's no doubt that the youth of color are much more likely to be in juvenile facilities. And you can see the comparisons here. If they're 4.4 times more likely, 315 as opposed to 72 to every 100,000. I mean, Latina youth, same thing, 27% more likely, which is 92 per 100,000. And then the Asians, of course, and that goes back to family also, because they really don't play in terms of the determination of making sure that kids are studying. And so we have to change our mentality some kind of way from the church, from our communities, to really be able to help our kids understand the importance of representing authority, representing academics, and the importance of it. So you can see that. I think is there one more after that? I'm not sure. That the last one. Yeah. In general, the whole situation, we're over prisoned in we only represent 13% of the population, but 40% in prison. And then the United States is 5% of the whole world population is in prison, but 25% is in the United States. So you can see how it just breaks up, and you can see the other things without going too deep into the overall disparity. But on this case, I think we all need to be very concerned about what those disparities represent, because I'm very, very concerned about what that means in terms of the Black community, and even from this point. Now, admittedly, you can take the slide down. I think that's the last one. I think that during COVID, as I looked at the statistics, during COVID, of course, because the kids were not encouraged to be out and things happened, there was a drop actually during the COVID time, but now it's increasing again. And unfortunately, that's something that we're going to have to, as a community, are going to have to face. So the academics is very important, and just basically having a father understand the importance of being the family in the home. Those kind of things are critical as it relates to that prison pipeline. But once you start, we're doing everything we can. I don't know if you guys know this, but within the juvenile justice system, that there's actually a school system within the state where they have to go to school and they have to do that, and also take the normal scholastic achievement test that other students take. And unfortunately, many times they're failing and very low because, again, they're not that inept on standardized testing. So all those things play a role in this process, but we try to catch them up while they're in the juvenile system, as opposed to them getting in a worse scenario. If we can keep them and get them a job and get out, then help them in a stable home, then maybe they won't just graduate to the adult system. But it is very critical what we're facing in our state related to the juvenile system and graduating to the adult system.
Okay, I want to ask you one more question. I know Representative Maynard has to leave early, so I want to open questions up for her before she has to leave. But just real quick, Bishop Hunt, as you just talked about what you talked about, how can families support? So let's say somebody on this call, their child gets arrested tomorrow. What's the best case scenario, or what can they do to get the best outcome for their child in the system? And what is it like if they don't have that support or that family support or intervention?
The first thing is to show up. If they get in trouble, many times, many parents are so at the end, they're not there. You got to be present. Even for a judge, a juvenile judge that's before their children, if they don't see the support of the family and they don't see that there's a reason to give them some other diversionary options, then they'll feel like they're going to continue to do the same thing, and they would just take them on to the juvenile system. And it's the same thing about the adult system. A family that can support their child, even if that child has stretched the limits and it looks as though that child is just on the wrong way in terms of his own conduct and misconduct. But the family support, even in the first court systems, is very, very key, because that will maybe give the judge an idea that maybe we can help him in some way other than being sent immediately to a facility, a juvenile justice facility.
Okay. Thank you for that. I want to open it up to any questions. If you all have any questions, I guess you can raise your hand. If you have a question from Representative Maynard, because I know she has to leave early, but also if you have questions.
Mike, I just wanted to recognize that Representative Angela Moore joined the group. She represents the DeKalb County areas.
Yes, Representative Moore, welcome to the call. And I know you're also a supporter of school choice as well.
Thank you
for coming on the call.
Well, I represent Rockdale, DeKalb, and parts of Henry County as well, city of Stockbridge and Ellenwood.
Okay,
that
awesome.
would be the 91st House District of Georgia.
Awesome. Thank you for being in attendance. Does anyone have any questions for Representative Maynard? Maybe it's in the chat. Maybe it's in the chat.
Hey, Michael, this is Sean here. I'm just listening in. And maybe you guys address this. So if you did, please just gloss over it and if it's already been addressed, but I've been paying attention to these stats on what happens to our young men for probably the last 8 years. I have a 23-year-old, I have a 22-year-old, I have a 16-year-old, and I have a 10-year-old who's still in school now. And the boys, I watched the boys and their friends struggle, and they went to Johns Creek High School, which has a lot more resources than some of the schools we're talking about, and even they struggled. Not because of lack of resources, but just because of lack of attention, I guess. And um, maybe you all address this, but there is a strong correlation between kids' performance in school and some of the other elements that the bishop just showed, and the kids not having a male figure to in their lives, whether it's a father in the household or a mentor of some sort. The father in the household, of course, is nothing that really can be addressed here directly. It's related to what the bishop said earlier about family. But is there anything that's being discussed with respect to mentorship for these young kids? I had to mentor quite a few boys who didn't have a father, and my house was the place they all hung out at. So I did the best that I could. But is there something that is in discussion, or at least a thought process around providing some sort of mentoring program for these young people who don't have a male figure or father figure in their house or in their lives? That's my question.
Yes, there actually are a lot of mentorship programs. The problem is there just aren't enough. There are so many kids that need a mentor, so many kids that need extra resources, that there's just not enough to go around, which is why I say to some of these nonprofit groups, oftentimes people get into a phase of feeling like they're in competition with another agency because they don't want someone to move in on their turf. This is not a subject where you can look at it as territorial. This is a situation where organizations really need to be welcoming in as many people as possible, helping other organizations get started. It's hard to start organizations. One thing that people don't know is your county commissioner, they have a lot of resources if there's someone that does want to open up a nonprofit, especially if it's regarding the youth. I know in particular, Commissioner Khadija Abdur-Rahman in Fulton County, she is very proactive in trying to help these nonprofit organizations. I'll also say that there are a lot of, there's a group called Construction Ready. I need to find the link and I'll put it in here. There's a job fair for people to enter into the work field. You don't need any educational background. That's also kind of what the premise is behind the Fulton Technology and Energy Authority that I created. It is a workforce development agency, if you will, that only supports people in underserved communities, but in the realm of technology and renewable energy. So another way to mentor children as well as parents is to just give them some opportunities in the workforce, some higher paying wage jobs instead of, no one can live off of 8, 10, can't even live off of $20 an hour in some cases. So I'll put that information in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Representative Maynard.
Is Representative Moore, just quickly, you say that there are not enough programs. Are the programs out there, are they being fully taken advantage of? Do you know?
No and yes. And that's a complicated question because everybody that receives resources does not necessarily use them wisely to help people. So that's another issue. That's something that the Fulton Technology and Energy Authority is looking to do, is kind of be a hub. So we can see what are the agencies doing, what kind of work are they producing, to just kind of fill in the holes. So a lot of it does have to do with some people just don't know. And that's why the more people are engaged, the more they really can find out about resources. From our perspective as a state rep, a lot of people don't know this, but we get paid $20,000 a year for a full-time job. We do not have a budget. So unlike other elected officials, they have a budget to send out information in the mail. We don't have that. We have to raise money to send information out to the community. So that makes it a lot more difficult to service the community because we just don't have a budget, which is why raising money is so important.
Gotcha. I didn't know that. I knew you got paid little, but I didn't know you didn't have any money to do it. So, okay, so that means grassroots and community efforts are very vital and very key. Amanda, Bishop Hunt, do you want to speak to those, to any of that, mentorship programs, grassroots commitment or engagement? And then if anybody else has a question, you can raise your hand.
Well, I'll just jump in and say that, of course, we've had, some of our men have mentored young men in the community. I know Gwinnett has a pretty consistent mentoring program. As a matter of fact, one guy that just recently has been coming to our church. He used to head that whole program up. But again, they always say we need more mentors. We need more people. So I think churches like ours and others, we need to really encourage the men to get involved with the lives of these young guys. When our previous church was right across the street from alternative school, and they were really having some issues. So many of us went over. Actually, the men and the ladies from our church would go over there and just meet with them and try just to help them. But that's just a small little fraction of what the need really is. The need is very, very great. And I would just encourage churches and community groups get as involved as you possibly can, because any support particularly from male mentors, especially, would be incredibly helpful. But we just don't have enough people that are committed. And one last thing I'll say is also they need to see consistency. Sometimes they will reject, but once you are consistently there for them, even if they are not consistently doing right, but you're still there, that still goes a long way in terms of their own character building and the other things that I feel like are important, particularly a Christian foundation for their life. So those are just some of the things that I would say we have to be concerned about from a position of a pastor and community and 501c3 groups.
And I'd also like to add, there are a lot of success stories for kids in some of these low-income homes without fathers. One of my colleagues, Denisha Allen, she was one of those kids who grew up that way. And she utilized school choice. Her aunt and her grandmother raised her. Her mom was in and out and things like that. And she utilized school choice. And she ended up going to a private school that had Christian conservative values, and it changed the trajectory of her life. That's why we believe so strongly in school choice. A lot of taking God out of the schools. God is important in the home, just as important as fathers, mothers, and everything else. God is what our entire country needs to get back to. Godly principles and values. And if you're teaching your kids that, you're teaching them to read the Bible, you're teaching them things like that. Sometimes that happens in school. So if we can get more kids into private schools, Christian conservative schools, classical schools, which teach about grammar, music, giving kids a broader worldview and things to look forward to in life, not just social, emotional learning and changing your gender and all these ridiculous things that are being taught these days. If you give kids, if at least one person, even a teacher, believes in a child and shows them love and compassion and that you can be something in life, sometimes that in itself can change the trajectory of a child and of their life. Just having one person that loves you, that cares about you, that teaches you about the Lord, and that cares about you. And especially like even with meals, sometimes in the summertime, we hear stories of kids not even barely eating in the summer because they get most of their meals in school. So being in school, and a good school and a safe school with compassionate teachers, smaller classrooms, and learning things that are actually important in life are going to help a lot of these kids, even if they do come from low income or they have just a dad or just a mom or just a grandma. Sometimes being in a better school system can change the trajectory of a kid's life. So that's why we want school choice.
Bonnie Chapel, I guess she talked about emotional intelligence in the chat. Does anybody want to weigh in on that? The importance of emotional intelligence, where you get that from? So I guess these are things that you need to get in the home from your parents or from your, I don't know, community, church. Like, how do you develop how does a child develop emotional intelligence? And how important is that to the formation of a healthy, strong child that grows into a productive adult? With COVID, we had masks. I don't know if that impeded some of our emotional intelligence cues, um, or how that impacted things. But does anybody have anything to say about emotional intelligence?
I'll jump in and just add something. I agree that emotional intelligence is very important, and oftentimes it has to do with how do you feel about yourself. And you can feel best about yourself if you are secured in who you are. So I think that, the values of just knowing that there's a God and not just yourself, I think that helps you guys. The Frederick Douglass Institute supports those values. I think if we got more, or if Black communities got back into the church the way that we were in the past, I don't think that we would have as many of the problems that we have right now. I can't say that, scientifically with data that is necessarily true, but I do think that if you look at the statistics, atheism is going up and Christianity is going down. Churches are struggling to get people back in the door, especially in Black communities. And in the past, Black communities were the backbone of the church, and now people don't even, they could not quote a Bible verse if you asked them to. So I think from an emotional intelligence perspective, my hope is that if you're securing yourself, if you have a foundation that knows you're not out here alone, it will help you decipher things, because oftentimes you feel like there's nothing else, right? And so that's just my personal opinion.
Just to piggyback on what you said, I remember a couple of months ago in Jeopardy, not one contestant knew the Lord's Prayer. That's a telling sign of where we are right now in our society. Representative Moore, you want to be an honorary panelist? If you want to interject, I will let you. But I'm going to take a commercial break right now and say that the Douglass Leadership Institute,
Okay.
we have a conference coming up on November 2nd through the 4th in Fort Mill, South Carolina. That's just outside of Charlotte. We would love to have everyone on this call join us. You can go to our website, conference.dlinstitute.org, to find out more details. We have a pitch competition for young people. You know of any young entrepreneurs? We have a competition. It's a Shark Tank style competition. If they have a business idea, they can apply, make an application for that business idea, and there's a $5,000 first place prize for the winning idea. There's also second and third place prizes as well. Plus, we're going to end the conference with a gala. Got a lot of surprises for the gala. It's really exciting. I'm excited about it. Get dressed up in your formal best. So anyway, so the Douglass Leadership Institute, Our Faith, Our Family, Our Freedom Regional Conference will be November 2nd through the 4th in Charlotte, North Carolina, or outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. You can go to our website for more information. With that being said, Representative Moore, did you want to say something? And then I have a couple of people with their hands raised.
Yeah, I'd like to just add that this is generally my field, have been for many decades, and working with troubled children and their families. And the one thing that we did find out that, social emotional learning, often when a child, as we know, they're having emotional problems, they're going to have behavior problems. And if they have behavior problems, they're not going to have the skills to be able to sit down and learn. And so I think a lot of the social emotional developments come from that, knowing, and I worked with behavior disorders in a classroom as well. So we had to really work with children to help them identify their feelings, to be able to manage their impulsivity, et cetera. So we had to work with them before they would actually be able to learn. And I think this is what the school has now segued into some other issues, as well. But skill-based learning, how to deal with one's emotions, I think is probably number one. And in my work with juvenile justice, and did this for a couple of decades, and also in what we call like the foster care, the treatment foster care program, for severely emotionally disturbed kids, we found the same factors, which were that when children had a lot of trauma, they were just coping, and their ability to cope would actually be manifested in their, the difficulties that they had managing their emotions, their impulsiveness, and that kind of thing. So it's a really it's a very complex thing. Now, the motivation, the church and the faith was so critical. And I think with the kids that I work with, the ones that really seemed to improve were the ones that found that sense of faith, which gave them that sense of purpose and meaning in their life. And when we developed treatment foster care, which I have to say that the parents were the primary treatment agents, they were, in my opinion, miracle workers. We did this in DeKalb County, treatment foster care, some of Fulton County, I know Rockdale County, Gwinnett, Metro Atlanta, and I helped develop and implement these programs. These parents, they were treatment parents. They could take a child who, let's say, was had been hospitalized for a lot of mental health problems, was on a myriad of medications. They would be, since maybe 7 or 8 years old, but they would take a child that maybe was now 13 years old, that was functioning on a second grade or third grade reading level. And in about 6 months, they were able to bring that child up to a normal reading level, 7th or 8th grade. So they're, it's the primary issue we ran into is a sense of permanency. They were taken out of the homes when they were, they're, healed now, and they were taken out of the home. So they lost that sense of connection and permanency. So I thought I'd just kind of add this. It's dealing with the children in the community, being able to work with the churches and have them open up their facilities. Years ago, and I kind of mentioned in the chat room, we had what we call community treatment centers, and they were in Fulton County and then in DeKalb County. They were in the churches, and we also had a classroom in the treatment center. At that time, I was also a court service worker, so they really didn't, do what they were supposed to be doing. They had a little bit of that discipline there, like, but I'm hoping that.
But that's
that
a good resource that you're sharing with us. And Joyce Drayton also shared a resource in chat. There's a link to a parenting site as well. I wanted to ask Bishop Hunt. Georgia is one of the few states that prosecutes 17-year-olds as adults. Last year, and maybe Representative Nana, you can chime in on this as well. Last year, the state house passed a bill to make 17-year-olds juveniles again, to be charged as juveniles, but that bill died in the Senate. I don't know what's going to happen in the year to come, but I just wanted to ask you, Bishop Hunt, and Representative Nader, do you all think that is Georgia too harsh to have to prosecute 17-year-olds as adults, or is it too soft to not be harsh? So we had, right, in Las Vegas last week, I think two boys, two teenagers, they ran over a bicyclist and he died. And they were laughing about it. They purposely hit him with their car. And one of them said, I'll be out in 30 days. So, so in some places it seems like we're too soft on crime when it comes to young people. And maybe some people feel like in Georgia we're too harsh because even a 17-year-old is tried as an adult. So do you guys have any idea, any way to weigh in on what's the balance of how to treat juvenile crime?
Yeah. When I
That
was
question was
working with
for
the
that
juvenile
question was for
offenders,
Bishop Hunt. That question was for
go ahead,
Bishop Hunt
Misha May.
and for Representative May.
I did put in the chat the website for the Georgia General Assembly. So on that website, people can see upcoming meetings, upcoming hearings. We're in session January through April. And so this is the website where you would go to see what's upcoming. So for example, the bill that you're talking about, people could actually come to the Capitol, watch the debates in person, or they can watch it online at this website. For me, I never feel like I never want to prosecute any child, right? But there's another side to that. There are children that are killing people. And in that essence, we have to look at it like this. What are we going to give them once we adjudicate the case and they are found guilty? What do the jail and prison systems look like as far as relearning and, you know, getting them on the right path? Even though if you kill somebody, you may not ever come out of that institution again. But how do you find a sense of purpose in whatever space that you're in? I think I understood both sides of the story is I guess what I'm trying to tell you. I think it's really sad that children are killing people. But in the same breath, it's really sad that someone died, and that's somebody's family member. It could have been another child. And so there must be some sort of atonement, if you will, to these serious crimes.
Mhm. Yeah, I would, first of all, I agree that it's not a hard, fast kind of black and white situation. Um, it's just so many issues depending on what the case would be, the facts of the case, what the situation where their child would be in terms of whether or not they should be tried as an adult. The organization that with juvenile justice, they certainly were supporting raise the age, and you know that has some merit to it, certainly does. But it's really the dependency of those judges, particularly in the juvenile system, that needs to be able to have that determination, and then those attorney generals and those prosecutors that will really look a little more behind just what was done, but to see if there's some other options they can have than necessarily charging them as an adult. So yeah, the 17 is a little much, and I know many people are opposed to it, but unfortunately, some of those heinous crimes that are done, sometimes those kids can really be treated like adults because they're committing crimes like adults. So I just think that there has to be some kind of sense of discretion that the judges have to make those kind of decisions. And we just have to believe that they would, but make those right decisions based on the situation. Let me just jump back one more thing that was said earlier in terms of the emotional issues that relate to these kids. As a board member, we just recently had a meeting. I don't think this is confidential information, but that it was more like 60 to 70% of our kids have some kind of emotional issue. Some, when they get into the juvenile system like that, fortunately, they can get medication that can help them with that process. But of course, many times when they're in the communities, they don't have it and they don't address it. And they just, go into whatever their peer pressure is, and they are pushed to do things outside what might not necessarily be their character if it's treated appropriately. But and from the front, and at 60, 70%, that goes all the way across the gamut. It may just be somebody that slightly needs some help, and in some major situations. But and that's also mental health is a huge thing, even in adult systems. With the greatest mental health provider is actually in corrections arena. And when they come out, they don't get the kind of support that they need, unfortunately. So mental health is huge as it relates to these kids also. And usually it goes unattended, and the schools and the counselors and the teachers just get overwhelmed with so many issues that relate to discipline. So therefore, they just shoot them right on through the system, whether it's to get them in trouble, get them for law enforcement. Eventually, they may get suspended or out of school. And then, of course, from that point, they're almost destined to go right into the juvenile system. So we have to be careful all the way around. It's not as much the age as the care. How can we get to these young people in enough time to really see what their situations are and try to get the kind of care and the support? Now, I will lastly say this, and a couple of people mentioned it already. I mean, no doubt, to have a Christian environment, a strong biblical influence around them certainly does help. We had so many situations where some of our kids excelled in athletics, some excelled in academics, and they before their years of were having problems in school, but they kind of selectively have gone through and become much more mature. As they get more mature and they have a foundation, then of course we see a better scenario, and they have a community around them that supports them and encourages them. Some of our leadership tries to support them when they're on track and field or their games, just to let them know it's not just their families, but it's also people around them that do care about them. So those kind of things are huge. So a church environment's huge, community environment's huge, and mental health is a very key factor to some of these young people that desperately need help. They're looking for help actually by their lack of discipline. And many times we overlook it because they're such a problem. The teachers and administrators just basically want to cast them aside because they're the worst case scenarios, and they really don't want to be bothered with it. They rather project themselves and so into the majority they feel like will be a better chance of success.
Thank you. We're about at the hour mark. I did want to close it with one more educational question, and wanted to circle back around to classical education, because Amanda, you brought it up, and I'm a big proponent of classical education. I'm a former teacher, and when I started a school in Africa, we used the classical education model, which was very successful. And I saw in the headlines today, actually, that Florida is now allowing the CLT, the Classic Learning Test, as a permissible instrument for acceptance into Florida universities. So it's really resurging this call towards classical education. You see it a lot more in the news now. So Amanda, do you see classical education? Do you think it's going to make a breakthrough or reemergence? And how do you see classical education as a solution to a lot of these issues we've been talking about today? And the other two panelists can weigh in if you want to as well.
I heard most of what you said.
Oh, basically, do you see classical education as making a comeback, and why is it important for it to make a comeback if it does?
Yes, it's making a huge comeback. There are even hybrid schools that are are partially at home and partially in a old school classroom setting where it's just one room, and the kids are all in there from maybe like 4th to 8th grade, all learning about music, art, math, reading, science, and the parents can participate. A lot of people are going back to the old ways. Classical education is very traditional. It's based on a lot of times Christian principles. They're teaching kids things that are very important to them, very geared towards individual learning. They're teaching them about the foundation of this country and how this country was built on Judeo-Christian principles. It's teaching them about, just like even my son, like I was telling you, he's doing the Heritage Foundation, which is a classical basis, learning the Constitution, learning your rights as a citizen. These are things that can change the trajectory of a child's life without teachers that are not qualified to be trying to regulate mental health and trying to regulate the emotions of kids. Teaching them things and getting their attention on things that are really important and things that can change their life, help their life, it's amazing. I mean, the positives, like I'm just getting so excited and tongue tied just because I can just kind of see, I can visualize and envision our country changing for the better if more children would get a classical education, if more children's parents, whether who, you know, it could be grandma, it could be grandpa, it could be your mom and dad, it can be just your mom or just your dad. If somebody will sit a child down.
I think we're losing Amanda.
Teach them that they're not a victim, then that would be amazing. And that's what classical education does. It gives children, you know, opens up their imagination, and it teaches them that they have a foundation, that they're a part of something greater than themselves.
Yeah, and most of our founding fathers were trained and taught classically as well.
Yes,
By their parents, by the way. But anyway,
that's right. That's right.
they were very brilliant people. So I'm gonna wrap it. I want to give you guys, our panelists, a minute to just say closing words that you want to say on the issue to parents. Anything that you would want to leave them with, any thought that you would want to leave them with in terms of this parenting issue. Because I wanted to do this for a while because there's so many crises in our educational system, in our community, when it comes to crime, and we want to try to path forward. I would like to do this in person and actually in different places around the state. So this was kind of a test run. So if you all have any feedback, because I think it's an important topic that many parents need or would like to have just information of what I can do, what I can, what tools do I have to improve the outcomes for my children. And so if you all, Representative Maynard, I can start with you, Bishop Hunt, and Amanda, if you have like just any closing words that you would like to start with, that would be awesome. And then we can let everyone go and enjoy their evening.
I put some links in the chat. This one article, I think it's the last one from the Georgia Recorder. I think it's a good article because it highlights some bills that you can click on to see exactly what they're saying. One of the bills that we passed was the bill about if you feel like the school is teaching your child something that you don't want them to learn. Now there is a process where parents can go about opposing that. And so it's, if you find that you want to oppose something that is being taught in the school, this first link, it leads to the Georgia Board of Education commissioners, because the process is you let your teacher know, the principal, the local school board, it ultimately goes to the Board of Education, to this group here. So this link is just so you know who your advocates are. Why is this important? This is important because I just had a meeting with a group of Hindu parents yesterday, and I did not know this, but the swastika symbol is one of their symbols of faith. But most of us just know that symbol from the Nazis, right? And so they're having a problem with teaching their children their faith, but the school telling them this is a symbol of hate. And so there needs to be an avenue for any parent, no matter what they, whatever they feel or whatever principles they have in their home, to be able to advocate for their principles. The last thing I just want to say with the classical education, some of the pillars that people mention sometimes may be courage, honesty, perseverance, service, and responsibility. I do think all of those things are important. One thing that does scare me a little bit is I don't think everyone knows the difference between subjectivity and objectivity. And so one of the things that I'm going to be proposing next year, when kids or when students are in school learning to be a teacher, they really need to also learn what is subjective and what is objective. We don't need people inserting their opinions into the classroom. We just need people to teach.
Awesome. Context is key. Context is key. Bishop Hunt?
Well, I think those are great comments. I could go down both of that related to classical education. I think is absolutely excellent. But we have to realize that a lot of that is based on the thinking patterns of the teachers, and we have to recognize that we have to in the family we have to give them a foundation because I've been looking at all kind of materials recently. I've been talking about biblical worldview in our church and with our men, and we have to teach our kids what to believe and not what to believe. And if they can stand on the standard of the Word of God, they have a better chance of not being subject to, as Representative Maynard is talking about, that subjectivity, which we have to be careful. And it's bleeds into the classrooms, bleeds into the policies of the schools. Because I want to be clear, our children not only just the problems of fatherlessness in the home, but there are also targets on the back of our kids in terms of how they believe, and that's all a part of making a decision what kind of schools they get, whether we subject them to government schools or we subject them to independent charter schools or even homeschooling. Those are major decisions that we have to make for our children because if they don't have a good foundation, they'll be subjected to all kind of whims and influences that all to me attack the family. The family is the key. With everything we're talking about right here, if we don't sustain a great family, a father and a mother in a home, siblings that also encouraging their brothers and sisters to stand for a foundation and the father that sets a foundation for the home. Now, that may seem as though that nuclear family is something that we've lost in our generation, but we're gonna have to fight for it with everything we have. We got to fight for our families because our kids are being attacked in so many different ways and not being cared for appropriately. The first place of discipleship, first place of teaching, first place of honor, first place of credit is right there in that home for those young people. So I just want to just emphasize that as we're talking about it, family is key to the development of our young people.
Amen. Amanda?
Yes, for school choice, you can visit federationforchildren.org and support going into January session to get involved, get SB 233 passed. That's going to help the kids in the bottom 25% that are in schools that are failing. And even if some of these kids come from fatherless homes, if they come from low economic backgrounds, getting them in schools that teach them all kinds of different things. Like I was telling you earlier about Denisha Allen, she came from her grandmother, her mom, but now she's a married woman with a child. Why? Because school choice changed the trajectory of her life. It opened her up to a broader worldview and put her on the right path. And that can happen for a lot of our children, no matter where kind of background they come from. We at AFC believe that all children have the right to an education and that they are not beyond help and that they can change their lives for the better. And we want to help them do that. So please support SB 233, support American Federation for Children. You can visit federationforchildren.org. And thank you all so much.
And thank you, panelists, for joining us this evening. I apologize for my audio. My on the computer is not working, so I'm doing it through my phone. So I apologize if my audio is a little choppy. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Again, we got to get this message out. We got to get the word out. That's how we build a better society. The family is the building block of society. If we have strong families, strong children, educated children, committed parents, then we'll have a better society. So I want to thank Representative Maynard for your service. Thank you, Bishop Hunt, for your insight, and Amanda as well for yours. And thank you everyone for coming on tonight. We'll do more things in the future. I thank you for your support for our organization, and have a good evening. So yeah, so Amanda, I'm all about the classical. I'm all about the classical
Yes,
education.
it's
And
so good. It's so
yeah,
good. I hope
yeah.
that even President Trump has like a 1776 initiative. I didn't want to mention that because I don't want to mention Trump about everything, but yeah, that really will help our country, our children. It'll help